Here. Thank you very much for joining us today on Fact to Fiction, where we unpack the truth behind my favorite specialty thrillers. Think Michael Crichton, Daniel Suarez, A.G. Riddle. And while these works may differ in genre or subgenre, each immerses the reader in a new but realistic world. And the best of these blend fact with fiction so well, it's impossible to tell the difference, right? We
Yeah.
don't know what is, what could be, and what's totally impossible. It would take an expert to know. So each week, I'll meet up with an expert and we'll select a new specialty thriller. We'll talk about why we love the book and unpack the truth behind the fiction. Today, we're going to review Kevin Boaz's book, Immortality, with Kevin himself as our expert. So we're so lucky and so excited to have you today. Um, and Kevin, your book is almost 15 years old. But let me say, like all great works, like Daniel Suarez's Demon, which was 2009, or Michael Crichton's Prey, which is now 20 years old, and is also about has nanotechnology in it.
Mhm.
There's still all of your books, all of yours and theirs are still so relevant. And I'm write techno thrillers too, but I'm just not, I don't think I'm that smart to write a book that 20 years later is going to be, or 18 years later is going to be right on. So kudos to you for that. And I mean,
You.
it's
Thank
like
you.
you're reading, it's really so relevant, so relevant. So, Immortality is a big book. It's,
Mm.
I think it's an epic techno thrilling saga.
I agree.
Um, I think Chuck Wendig's Wanderers. That's is similar to me. If you've not read it,
No, I haven't.
oh, it's wonderful. It was I think it's a
I'll have to now.
2019 book. Yeah, you've got a lot of details in terms of your characters. You really bring out, a lot of characters and the science, and the doing science part of it, right? And of course, then we have an apocalyptic moments and
Yes.
as well. So for readers out there, I have a recommendation. Um, don't read this book trying to guess where it's going, which is, as a writer, what I tend to try to do. Like, okay, I see where it is. Here we are in Act One. We're going there. No. And this is not a plane ride. It's a cross-country trip along back roads, and you're the passenger. So strap in and let it guide you. Enjoy the ride. That's my recommendation.
Wow. Thank
Uh,
you.
your book starts out kind of tame, a
Mhm.
microbiologist working in the field with his young student lover. Um, but then it flips on its head, and all hell breaks loose with a killing plague that seems both biological and chemical at the same time.
Mhm.
Our intrepid researcher is tapped by the CDC to find out what's happening. And then from there, we're not going to give away spoilers. We're going to try not to. We'll
Thank
cut them
you.
out. If we do it, we'll just edit them out. So we don't have to worry. And I confess, again, I hadn't read Immortality before, and I was missing out. And it's so relevant in today's world with our cutting edge, controversial science, killing pandemics, and the impact of climate change. I mean, it can,
Funny.
unfortunately, still so relevant, right? So,
Crazy. Actually, that it still is crazy.
yes. All right. Well, let's get into immortality then, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So, so this actually came from your website and a quote that you made, which I tried to adhere to in my stories as well. You said, every bit of inventive technology in my stories either exists or could exist. Every
Mhm.
scenario in my story is theoretically possible. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit. That maybe is crossing your books, but
Sure.
you know what you mean by that, and what how you abide by that.
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, I was started life as a scientist and an engineer. So I put just a ton of work into these books. My background material is usually many times the length of the book itself. And I don't mean when I say that it's all possible, I don't mean that it's, possible today in some cases, but it's plausible, maybe might be a slightly better word. Like for example, there's a lot of books with FTL, faster than light travel, but that's
Okay.
really probably not possible. So I would never write about that. Same thing with time travel. I would never write about it because it just is highly unlikely that we will ever accomplish these things. I mean, maybe, traveling through wormholes or something, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
So those things are farther out than what I would write about in my techno thrillers. Although in the book that I can't name that will have my name on it, there is faster than light travel. So I have to take that back a little. But that's sci-fi, so that
Yeah.
doesn't count.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of what I mean is it's plausible. So I go through all the science. I actually design on paper almost everything that's in the novels. Again, I don't want to give away stuff, but
Wow.
for example, in Immortality, the CDC has level 4
Mhm.
um, level 4 labs, and there really wasn't level 4 at that point. So, but I sat down did my research for God knows how long, designed it, figure out how it could work. So there's so much thought put into it, and it's obviously not perfect. It's got to find something that,
Yeah.
you know, but so that's really the process is
Great.
I design it all as if I was a scientist or engineer.
Great. Well, let's go back to then your imagination. And I want to just kind of talk about your premise of your book and see what inspired you and see if I got it right. So also, I think we have kind of age-old bacteria, Omicron bacteria, and how you think that bacteria might be partially responsible, could have been responsible for historic extinction level events, and how
Mhm.
that might transfer into, where we are today. And could there be future
Yeah, kind of weird, huh?
extinction level events with the polar ice caps melting? And you can you talk to me a little bit about little baby bugs or bacteria?
Yeah,
Bugs, I know.
yeah. I mean, one of the things that we don't know really as people, we don't know what happened 5,000 years ago. Or 6,000 years ago. That's when written history kind of started. And so when we're talking about dinosaurs and extinction events, we're going back 65 million years, hundreds of millions of years. And, that's one of the main characters in the novel is a paleobiologist, and he looks at these past events and tries to figure out what is going on. And I don't know in the novel and I certainly don't think that bacteria were the cause of like maybe the last big extinction with the dinosaurs. But there's so many mysteries around it, and we as scientists don't really talk about the mysteries. We talk about, what we know as best we can know it, and we don't like to talk about what we don't know. And so in the books, I talk about what we don't know. And, you know, for example, the fossil record that we have, that a lot of this is based on, the record has less than 1% of all the species that are ever alive in it.
No
And
way. Oh.
yeah, it's just a tiny fraction. And someone estimated that there was like 4.5 with 27 zeros is the number of creatures that have been alive on this planet. And
Wow.
so we actually have records of like the tiniest fraction of the creatures that have ever lived. So we base a lot of things on this fossil record, but it's such a tiny snapshot. I like the idea of like the pollsters, the political pollsters. It would be
Mhm.
like them going out and determining the pulse of the entire world by talking to a fraction of a person.
Mhm.
I mean, you'll get some stuff right because some people will all believe the same thing, but there's a lot you're going to miss. So, this big asteroid comes down, smashed 65,000 years ago, and creates a cataclysm. But the mysteries are huge creatures survived in the ocean, sharks, all sorts of big creatures,
Mhm.
fragile creatures like coral survived in the ocean. In small freshwater areas, fragile creatures, salamanders, things like that, survived. Alligators survived. All these big and small, fragile, and big, powerful creatures survived, and dinosaurs didn't. And for a long time, we thought they didn't, but now we know there's avian dinosaurs and
Mhm.
non-avian dinosaurs. And the avian dinosaurs, well, they did just fine, and they're hopping around in my backyard right now.
Mhm.
So, the big mystery is how come now everything on this planet must have suffered during this little big bang, but why did these creatures, these specific, family of creatures die out? And so in the novel, I say disease. A
Mhm.
disease finished them off. Bacteria, this
Mhm.
chromatium
Mhm.
finished them off.
Mhm.
And so this is what the one of the main characters, Michael, a paleobiologist, is researching. And he sees this pattern of extinctions. Maybe they were not totally cataclysmic extinctions, but mass extinctions that occur again and again and again. And he starts to see that there's a connection between that and this bacterium.
Mhm.
So that's I don't know if I got off track there on the question, but that's kind of the
No, I like it. I like it. I like it. That's amazing that we knew. You're right. Science says tend to limit themselves is limiting because it's all based on observation, which
truth.
is why I think there's so many cases science fiction leads reality, right?
Yeah.
Either, right? It's a whole other topic, but
Yeah, and I think scientists are rightfully concerned that they only want to talk about things that are like
that's
pretty
right.
darn sure.
That's right.
And so a lot of the stuff that's quite possible never gets discussed.
Amazing.
Science fiction.
So let's talk about so you're paleobiologist, I call him a
Mhm.
microbiologist, paleobiologist, um, ends up naming his bacteria Cobic 3.7, I think. And
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty funny, Cove to the COVID
it is.
coincidence. That's so kind of crazy, but
It's
yeah,
creepy.
and the idea that, we talked about, yeah, bacteria being responsible historically, but, bacteria also were a virus or the idea that humanity can be brought down by the smallest, probably we're
Mhm.
almost more likely to be brought down by the smallest of things than the biggest of things. And yeah, I don't think that's too far-fetched at all based on, anyway, so kudos there. Let's talk about, this is a little bit into it's not we'll try to keep it not a spoiler. And if we think it's too spoilery,
Oh, please,
we'll cut it out,
please.
okay? I wanted, because I don't think we can talk about all of this without actually talking a little bit about nanoparticles and bacteria and how little tiny things can work together. These things are called complex systems for our viewers. When you have lots of little tiny pieces or like organisms or computer code or whatever it is working together to bring out behavior that's greater than the sum of the parts. And
Mhm.
ants building an ant hill and living and all the great things ants can do, and ants have 400 brain cells. And so an ant on its own is pretty dumb, but ants together follow a few rules and build great things. I'd love to um,
Oh,
talk about how these little, that's an important part, I think, in your book, is that we get into trouble because these little individual very small beings actually come together to kind of band up against humanity, right? And what was your inspiration for kind of that and things working together?
oh, I mean, part of it was just, I don't think I initially was trying to be symbolic with it, but a big thing that I've always been concerned about is competition versus cooperation.
Mm.
So, I've always been kind of interested in this. And, I think about how our bodies are really very much what you're talking about too. We have all these tiny little cells which have absolutely no computational power,
Right.
and yet we emerge from it. Now, I mean, you can speculate forever how this happens and if we're even in our heads or, maybe we're a spirit and, that we're just a,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah. We only
projection.
have an hour, but
Yeah, yeah. But so yeah, so I think that, that was really what subconsciously brought me to this was the idea that cooperation is such a powerful, powerful thing. And I see so many examples in society where people disregard that and they think it's okay to have things just function without any central intelligence at all. And so that was part of, I think, what compelled me to write about it. And I think that was probably subconscious at first, but I look at what I wrote and I thought, oh yeah, well, that's probably where that came from. So it was, probably looking around at the world around me, the people, and how we were not working as well together as we should in this small little little thing. I think the other part of it too was that I'm trying not to spoil the novel here. The this is there's like a thing in the novel where it's about the cycles of civilization. There's a theory in it that, you know, we've had a history that goes back 5,000, 6,000 years. And before that, we really don't know what went on, just like with the whole dinosaur thing. And I think about how modern humans have been around since for at least 300,000, some people think 400,000 years. And I think it's kind of like the height of arrogance for us to think that, in 5,000 years, we went from banging stones together to AI and missiles and going to Mars maybe, and who knows what. And I think it's the height of our arrogance to think that we never did that before.
Mhm.
We never had, maybe we didn't go to Mars or anything like that, but 100 and 200, at least 295,000 years, we just sat there and banged rocks
That
together.
we
And then
didn't
all
have language or anything, right? Or right? Or
we didn't
complex
write
language.
anything.
Yeah, no writing. Yes, you're right. That's a good point. Yes.
I think it's
Yeah.
crazy. So I talk about this in Immortality that civilization could crumble, and if it crumbles, I mean, people think, well, we'd find some relics, right? But I went through all this research and I found out that it doesn't take that many thousands of years for New York City to turn into rubble,
Wow.
and but maybe you'd still find some stuff. But if we weren't completely extinct, which obviously didn't happen, we're still here, there would be people alive and they would be scavenging. They would be like, oh, I could use this, I could use that, I could use this.
Mhm.
Pretty soon, we would kind of take apart our own old society before we ever got around to building our new society. I don't know if society, who knows, this is all just theoretical fun stuff, but that whole cycle was something that has always intrigued me. And so that's part of what's in Immortality. And that's why there's these extinction cycles that this person Michael is investigating with all species. And at the same time, there's another story in the novel about human civilization kind of doing the same thing.
I think it's so interesting how when people read books, you bring your own perspective and your own experiences to those books. Because when I read it, I was thinking it was more like a neural network. And in your brain, in all those little neurons are they each little, if you pulled a neuron out, put it on, it doesn't do anything, right? It's literally an input and an output. How did just having all these neurons make a brain? We know a lot more about that now with artificial intelligence. We know, well, we still don't know, but we know that the best neural networks are ones that are very, are modeled after our brain. Still, even with all this, it's still these layers of neurons and they're connected to they're ones close by. It's like a net. It's like a web, and they send impulses. And so it's not at all preposterous to think that bacteria or some little mite could do the same thing. So I was immediately drawn to that and thought, wow, it's really, we don't know how these little organisms work together today. I don't know that people have studied that enough, and I'm going to go and look at it now and research it because it seems, we've done it with bigger things that we can see, ants, which aren't very smart, but I don't know if we've done it with little, even smaller things to see if they are come to some kind of complex behavior and some
There is research that shows that there is something like that going on. I
there
think
has to
it's,
be.
and same thing with trees and plants. They communicate with I don't know if it's pheromones or they're releasing chemicals into the air, and those chemicals can cause other trees to react. When one tree is attacked by a parasite, it releases chemicals that tell other trees to start producing something that those parasites don't like.
Wow.
So
Wow.
we're all, that was definitely something that was in my heart and my mind when I was writing Immortality, was that the Gaia idea that we're all interconnected. We're all part of some big, big whole. And, maybe out of that whole that we are emerges God, or
Yeah.
spirit, so that maybe we're the neurons in God's mind, and maybe
Love
that
it.
God is the neuron in someone other God's mind.
Yes.
But,
We're
so I
so
think
arrogant to assume that
we are,
all that. Yeah.
we are. We're the center of the universe.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting, very interesting. You know, I just realized I want to show real quick for our viewers or our listeners, not for our listeners, but this is your lovely, oh darn. All right, here it is.
Oh.
Lovely picture. Hopefully it's kind of backwards, but your lovely cover still looks as if it could have been created today. It's also timeless. I encourage everybody to go out and listen, or I listened, but or read Immortality. Wonderful epic saga, epic techno-thrilling saga. I like that. Okay, I'm
Thank
going to
you.
use that. I'm going to use that in I'm going to write the review and call it an epic techno-thrilling saga.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
thank you for your time, and I hope Kevin's going to join us in the future to review some
Sure.
other tech thriller books, and we'll talk about again the science behind them and how those authors, whether we think it's the truth behind the fiction, how much is true, how much is fiction. And so I want to ask you a question then, end with a recap of your premise, and I'm going to ask you that question then. So ancient bacteria can be the undoing of mankind, fact or fiction?
Boy, yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's possible. I mean, or maybe virus or bacteria, but some tiny microbe.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
it's
ancient
possible because,
microbe can be the
yeah,
undoing of mankind,
yeah,
fact.
I think it's because we have removed all the firewalls. You know, we travel great distances now on airplanes and boats and trains. So those natural firewalls that existed for our entire existence are gone. So I think, yeah, good.
Point. Yeah. So again, thank you again, Kevin, for joining us. And I hope everybody goes out and gets Immortality and enjoys it. And join us. We will keep you posted on Kevin's upcoming releases and all of the other new book reviews that we do. Thank you again for joining us.
Oh,
Everybody
thank
have a great
you.
day.